Good evening. I'm Sedalia Voss. Welcome back to Harlan's Hollow. Tonight, I'd like to share the next collection of letters, stories of quiet courage, unexpected friendships, and the people who discovered that the simplest lives often leave the deepest marks. There were theories, of course. There are always theories in a small valley. But the wooden crate arrived the way certain gifts do, without explanation, without apology, and at the right moment for exactly the right people, even if none of those people knew it yet. Good evening. I'm Sedalia Voss. Tonight's letter is a little different from the ones that came before it. There is no cedar box, no folded paper tucked away. What I have instead is a story that arrived the way the best valley stories do, in pieces, from several directions at once, each person holding a different corner of it until you lay them all flat and see the whole. I have a note from a school teacher, several entries in different journals, a few lines in a store ledger, and one small metal tag, tarnished, with a name stamped into it unevenly. I'll tell you the name at the end. Pull the covers up. The fire is lit. The Surprise on the Porch. Part 1. The Box at the Store. Spring, 1873. The crate appeared on the porch of Pryor's General Store on a warm morning in April, sometime between first light and the moment Calhoun Reed arrived for his weekly supplies. It was wooden, small. Someone had lined it with an old flour sack, still faintly smelling of grain. And inside, bumbling about, were 4 puppies. Calhoun stopped in his tracks upon seeing the commotion coming from inside the crate. He stood in the doorway, looking down at them for a moment, one mostly black, one brown, one the particular orange of creek clay, one so pale it was nearly white. Then looked up at Miss Myra Adeline Pryor, who was already behind her counter with the expression of a woman who has seen the crate, assessed the situation, and arrived at a firm conclusion. "They were there when I opened," she said, without looking up from her ledger. Said Calhoun. "I don't know whose they are." "I don't need a dog." Her last sentence was delivered with particular clarity, in the tone she reserved for matters she considered settled. Calhoun looked back at the crate. The pale puppy opened its eyes, murky hazel in color, unfocused, and made a sound that was not quite a bark, a declaration, an announcement of presence. "Ma'am, I don't need 4 dogs," Calhoun said. "That," said Mrs. Pryor, turning a page in her ledger, "is between you and them." He stood there for a moment longer, a man in the particular position of having arrived for flour and cornmeal and found himself responsible for something else entirely. From the porch steps behind him came a soft voice. "They're very friendly." He turned. On the top step sat a teenaged girl of about 14, dark-haired, sharp-eyed, with the focused attention of someone who had been there longer than either of the adults had noticed. She had her grandmother's quality of simply being present without requiring acknowledgement. Calhoun recognized her. He had known her since she was 7 years old, when she had appeared at his cabin door holding a jar with a crawfish in it and changed the shape of his mornings without meaning to. Clara Pryor, taller now, a willowy figure, just as certain of herself. "Yes, they are, Miss Clara," Calhoun said. "One of them has more color than the others," she said. "On the tips of its ears. I already looked." Calhoun looked at Mrs. Pryor. Mrs. Pryor turned another page. Calhoun scratched his head. Part 2. Eli Marshall. Eli Marshall arrived for his father's order approximately 10 minutes later, which was long enough for Calhoun to have set the crate on the porch railing and for Clara to have climbed up beside it. Clara had begun a thorough individual assessment of each puppy, narrating her findings to no one in particular. Eli was 17, Gideon Marshall's youngest son, lean and deliberate, with the quiet competence that goes unnoticed in a boy his age because it doesn't announce itself. He came around the corner of the store with a feed sack over one shoulder. He stopped when he saw the box. "Dogs?" he asked to the general air. "Puppies," Clara said, without looking up. "4 of them. One has extra color on the tips of its ears." "Are they foxhound?" "A mix, I think. Heart Mountain cur, perhaps. They look to be about 8 weeks old." Eli paused, quietly surprised by Clara's knowledge on dogs, but more so at how she had changed. He had seen her many times as a lively young girl. He was struck at how she had grown into a graceful young lady. He hadn't noticed until just that moment. He set his feed sack down on the steps and came up onto the porch with the elaborate casualness of someone performing indifference to an audience that was not fooled. He looked into the crate. The orange puppy, the clay-colored one, looked back at him with an attentiveness that was, for an 8-week-old creature, remarkable. It watched him the way a working dog watches, not just looking, but assessing, as if it was already learning the shape of the world it intended to manage. "That one's different," Eli said quietly. He glanced at Clara sideways. She was still looking at the puppies with complete absorption, her dark hair falling forward, entirely unbothered by his presence. "Eli Marshall," he said. "I know," she said. "Your father farms the North End. Your older brothers are Gideon Jr. and Samuel." A brief pause. "Clara Pryor. My grandmother owns the store." He stood there a moment, searching for a few clever words of which none came to him. "You already knew who I was," he said. "It's a small valley," she said, as a smile subtly appeared on her face. They stayed like that for a while, side by side at the porch railing, the crate between them, the puppies wiggling and wrestling. The orange one pawed at Eli. The pale one attempted repeatedly to climb out of the crate. The brown one began to nap with magnificent indifference. The black one investigated Clara's sleeve with great thoroughness. Neither Eli nor Clara spoke much. They didn't need to. There was enough happening that words were unnecessary. Clara finally spoke first. "The pale one should be called Pearl." Eli considered this. "What about the orange one?" he asked. She looked at the orange puppy for a moment. Then she looked at Eli, directly and honestly. "That one," she said, "isn't mine to name." Eli felt a tug inside his chest. He turned his gaze to the orange puppy, in part to divert attention away from the expression on his face. "Flint," he said, quietly. He knew the name was the right fit, though he was just saying it aloud for the first time. Clara nodded slowly. "That's perfect," she said, as if it had always been true and simply needed saying. Part 3. The Distribution. The valley received the puppies the way it received most things, without ceremony and with complete practicality. Eli carried Flint home inside his coat that afternoon, one hand underneath for support, the puppy's watchful head just visible, already learning the road. Gideon Marshall Sr. looked at his youngest son coming through the door with a puppy and said nothing for a long moment. Then he asked, "Does it work?" Eli set Flint down on the kitchen floor. The puppy stood, assessed the room with those attentive eyes. Then it walked directly to the hearth and sat down in front of it as if right at home. "Yes," Eli said. Gideon watched the puppy for a moment. "All right then," he said. Eli's eldest brother, George Jr., who had been working horses nearby, also needed a dog, as he had been without one since winter. He would take the black one and call him Shadow. He received him with more emotion than he intended to show. The brown one presented a problem. Nobody had claimed it. It was a fine puppy, placid, good-natured, the sort of dog that asks very little and gives a great deal. But it sat in the crate inside Mrs. Pryor's store, often sleeping through customer visits with serene indifference. Upon Calhoun's next visit to the store, he commented to Mrs. Pryor, "I think he's adopting you, ma'am." Mrs. Pryor looked up from her ledger and stoically at Calhoun. "No," she said. "He's a good-natured dog," Calhoun said. "I don't need a dog." "He already knows the store, ma'am. He'd keep a good eye on it." "That is not an argument." The puppy yawned enormously, showing all of its small teeth, then set its chin on the side of the crate and gazed at Mrs. Pryor with innocent, warm brown eyes. A long silence. "I'm not naming it something foolish," Mrs. Pryor said. "No, ma'am," Calhoun agreed. Mrs. Pryor named the dog Chester. She had him sleep in the back where he could keep an eye on everything in the store. Mrs. Pryor was otherwise rarely seen without Chester by her side. She was frequently overheard calling him a good boy and observed giving him generous pats on the head. Part 4. Pearl and the River. Calhoun adopted Pearl. She was not a large dog and would never be. Fine-boned and pale, with the murky hazel eyes that had cleared over the weeks into a deep honey amber with flecks of gold. If dogs could speak, Pearl would have said that Calhoun was hers, not the other way around. She slept by the fire. She followed him everywhere, whether he was walking the fence line or checking on his hen house. She went with him to the river each morning and sat with him in the same stillness he exhibited. She did not chase the birds. She watched them, the way Calhoun watched them, with quality attention and without intent to disturb the creature, but to be near it, to share the morning without demanding anything of it. Gideon Marshall Sr. mentioned to his wife one evening that Reed seemed different this year. His wife asked in what way. Gideon thought about it for a moment. Like he's got someone to keep watch over him, he said. Epilogue. A note from Sedalia. The small metal tag I mentioned at the start. I found the metal tag among items kept in a tin by the Harlan's Hollow Historical Society. Among letters, a survey map, a few photographs. I held it to the window light and read the names stamped into it unevenly. Pearl. An old yellowed paper tag was attached to the metal tag with string. The ink was so faint on the paper tag, I almost missed what was written on it. Reed. Harlan's Hollow. It was Pearl's dog tag. She belonged to Calhoun, and Calhoun belonged to her. I set the dog tag back in the tin carefully, the way you set down something that has been kept a long time and deserves to be kept a little longer. I thought about a wooden crate left before dawn on a store porch by someone who needed those puppies to find the right people and trusted the valley to manage it. I thought about a 14-year-old young lady who doted over a litter of abandoned puppies. About a 17-year-old young man who carried a puppy home inside his coat while steadying a feed sack over his shoulder. I thought about Mrs. Pryor, who did not need a dog, writing the name Chester in her store ledger on a sunny day in April in a hand that was, by all accounts, perfectly steady. And I thought about Calhoun Reed, walking to the river each morning with a pale dog at his side, sitting on the flat rock, watching the birds together, less alone than he had been, which is, I think, what was intended all along. Rest now. The letter is sealed. I'm Sedalia Voss, and I'll find you again next week. Good night. There is a particular kind of friendship that nobody plans. It arrives sideways, through a broken shutter in a rainstorm, or a ledger that needs carrying, or a dog that quietly decides two people belong in the same room. Mrs. Myra Adeline Pryor had spent a lifetime paying attention. Eli Marshall was just beginning to learn how. Neither of them realized they were about to become part of the other's story. Good evening. I'm Sedalia Voss. Tonight's letter came to me in an unlikely form, a store ledger, not the ordinary entries of goods bought and sold, though those are there too, running in Mrs. Pryor's brisk, efficient hand down column after column. What caught my attention were the margins. Pryor's general store kept meticulous records, but someone, beginning in October 1880, began making small notes in the margins of the ledger, Not inventory, not prices, small observations, a line here, a sentence there, written in a hand that started out uncertain and grew more confident. Not Mrs. Pryor's hand, but someone younger, someone learning. Pull the covers up. The fire is lit. The margins in the ledger. Part 1. The Storm. October, 1880. The storm came down from the ridge on a Thursday afternoon with the particular indifference of weather that has somewhere to be and no interest in what's in the way. Eli Marshall was 19 and had been cutting wood when the sky went the color of a bruise and the temperature dropped 20 degrees in the time it took him to put down his axe. He ran for the nearest shelter, which happened to be Pryor's general store, and arrived on the porch, soaked through and breathing hard just as the rain began in earnest. He stood under the overhang, shaking water from his hair, and became aware of two things simultaneously. The first was Chester, Mrs. Pryor's brown dog, sitting just inside the door, regarding him with placid sympathy. The second was the shutter, the one on the side of the building. Its hinge had given way at some point in the first gust, and it was swinging loose, banging against the store wall with each new surge of wind, a sound like a slow, methodical argument that nobody was winning. Mrs. Pryor appeared in the doorway. She looked at Eli. She looked toward the side of the building where the shutter continued its complaint. She looked back at Eli. "Well?" It was not a question. "I can fix that, ma'am," Eli said. "That'd be helpful," she said. "Come in and dry off first. I'm not having you fall off my porch in a rainstorm." She stepped back from the door. He came in. The store smelled of coffee and candle wax and the particular dry goods smell that Eli had known since childhood, a smell so associated with Mrs. Pryor herself that he had never quite been able to separate the two. She put a cup of coffee in front of him without asking, and went back behind her counter and opened her ledger, and that, apparently, was that. He stood with his coffee and dripped on the floor and listened to the rain and the shutter. After a while, he said, "Ma'am, you got a spare hinge?" "Third drawer from the left," she said, without looking up. "Behind the lamp oil." He found it. He waited out the worst of the rain. Then he went back out in the diminishing drizzle and fixed the shutter. Chester watched him with quiet approval. When Eli came back in, Mrs. Pryor looked up from her ledger. "Adequately done," she said. For Mrs. Pryor, this was approximately the same as anyone else saying, "Extraordinary." Part 2. Why he kept coming back. Eli came back the following week to check the hinge. It had held. Mrs. Pryor informed him that several crates in the storeroom needed moving. He moved them. She gave him coffee and cornbread. By winter, Thursday afternoons at Pryor's general store had become part of the shape of his week. Whatever needed doing, he did it. Chester greeted him each time with calm recognition. What Eli discovered over those afternoons was that Mrs. Pryor talked while she worked. Not excessively, simply steadily, the way a stove gives off heat. She talked about the valley, about the people in it, about the years before Eli had been born, and the small decisions that had shaped Harlan's Hollow into the place it had become. One Thursday in November, he asked why she kept such detailed records. She looked at him over her reading glasses. "Because things matter," she said. "Even small things. Especially small things. Nobody needs reminding of a flood or a wedding. It's the ordinary days that disappear." He thought about that all week. The following Thursday, he asked whether she would mind if he occasionally made notes in the margins. Mrs. Pryor was quiet for a moment. Then she slid the ledger across the counter. As she did, she glanced toward the back room. "Margins are there for a reason." Part 3. What he wrote. The first entries were small. Observations mostly. The way afternoon sunlight struck the front window in October. The sound Chester made when he dreamed. The family from Kentucky who stayed 3 days before moving west. A week later, he noticed a remark, a compliment, beside one of the entries. "Lovely description." Not Mrs. Pryor's handwriting. Different. Neater. He said nothing about it. His entries grew longer. The handwriting steadied. The boy who had arrived dripping rainwater onto Mrs. Pryor's floor slowly became someone who paid attention on purpose. One afternoon, in the spring of 1881, Mrs. Pryor read a note he had written about the river, how the water had sounded different in winter, more distant somehow, less deliberate. She was quiet for a moment. "You have a knack for it," she said. "For what, ma'am?" Eli asked, sweeping the floor. "For noticing details." Mrs. Pryor turned another page in the ledger. "My granddaughter has the same gift, different from yours, more thorough." Eli looked up. "Clara?" "Mm-hmm." Mrs. Pryor made another notation. "She comes in on Saturdays to help with inventory." Eli said nothing. Chester watched from his bed. "Saturdays," Mrs. Pryor repeated. This time she looked up from her ledger. Part 4. Saturday. Eli came in on a Saturday in April, on the pretext of a broken harness buckle that needed replacing. Clara was at the back shelves counting dry goods, a small notebook open in her hand, her dark hair falling the way it always did when she was concentrating. She looked up when he came in, then back at her notebook. "Harness buckle," she said. "Third shelf, left side, tin box." He found it. He did not leave immediately. "You're counting," he said. "Inventory," she replied. "Every Saturday. My grandmother's system." "Does it take long?" "There's a great deal to count." He was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up the notebook she had set on the shelf beside her and looked at the columns. Neat, precise, every figure exact. "You write like her." Clara glanced at him sideways. "She taught me." "She says figures are a form of honesty." "I believe there's truth to that." "She told me that things matter, even small things." Clara looked at him more fully then. The direct look he remembered from 2 years earlier, when they had sat on opposite sides of a crate of puppies on the store porch. "That sounds like her," Clara smiled faintly. Clara turned a page in the notebook. "You've been writing in the ledger." Eli looked up. "You read it?" "Of course I read it." "I thought your grandmother might have shown you." "No." The faintest smile touched the corner of her mouth. "I was curious." For reasons he could not have explained, the answer pleased him more than it should have. She returned to her counting. He found himself watching her pencil move down the page. "What did she tell you?" he asked. "About what?" "About honesty." Clara considered that. "That honesty isn't a feeling." Her pencil paused. "It's a habit." He thought about that for a moment. Then he nodded. "That sounds just like her." "It does." For a second, both of them smiled. He stood there in the afternoon light with a harness buckle in his hand and thought that this was possibly the most interesting conversation he had had in a long time. Mrs. Pryor, behind her counter, did not look up from her ledger. But Chester, from his place by the door, wagged his tail as though all his favorite people were exactly where they belonged. Epilogue. A note from Sedalia. I set the ledger down and thought about a young man who came in from a rainstorm, fixed a shutter, and discovered some things are worth writing down. The records tell us that Eli Marshall and Clara Pryor married in time and raised a family of their own. Mrs. Pryor had been right. It was the small things that mattered. Rest now. The letter is sealed. I'm Sedalia Voss, and I'll find you again next week. Good night. There are storms that announce themselves, and there are storms that arrive in April, when the fruit trees are in bloom and everyone has put away their heavy coats because spring has finally come. The great spring blizzard of 1901 was the second kind. So was the grace. Good evening. I'm Sedalia Voss. Tonight's letter is the hardest one I have held, not because it is dark, though it is in places, but because it is so honest, because the man who wrote most of it was not given to sentiment or elaboration, and so every word he chose carries the full weight of what he meant by it. What I have tonight is a small leather journal. Plain cover, no initials, the kind a farmer keeps for weather and yields and the occasional thing that needs remembering. It belonged to Gideon Marshall. Most of the entries are exactly what you would expect. Planting dates, fence repairs, the price of corn. But in April of 1901, the entries change. Tucked inside the back cover, folded once, is a single page in a different hand. Smaller, a woman's writing, the ink slightly uneven, as if the hand that held the pen was not entirely steady. I'll read Gideon first, then Clara. Pull the covers up. The fire is lit. What the April snow kept. Part 1. Before the storm. April 15th, 1901. Warm again today. Third warm week running. Fruit trees full out. The old apple on the south slope has more blossom than I have seen in 20 years. River running high, but easy. Good color to it. Went by Reed's place in the afternoon. Found him at the river, as usual. We did not talk much. We rarely do. Sat a while on the bank. He looked better than last winter. The cold had been hard on him. Spring suited him. April 17th, 1901. Eli came by in the evening. He and Clara had been at the store. Long day of it. Clara asked after Reed. I told her he seemed well. She said she would take him something from the kitchen on Friday. She has always looked after him since she was a girl. Some things you don't have to teach. The evening was warm enough to sit on the porch. Felt like summer coming early. Did not think anything of it. Part 2. The Storm Arrives. April 19th, 1901. Rain started in the night. Heavy. By morning it had turned to something else. Sleet first. Then snow. Snow in April. The fruit trees still in blossom. Temperature dropped fast. Too fast. From the 60s yesterday to the 30s by noon. The blossoms are freezing on the branch. Whole season's fruit gone, most likely. Nothing to be done. River rising. Cut the entry short. Too much to see to. April 20th, 1901. 5 inches on the ground this morning. Still coming down. Communication lines down. Roads drifted and no way to know what is passable. George Pickett Jr. has been away since Thursday. Supplies, we think, though no word since the lines went down. His mother is alone on the east side of the valley. Reed had gone over the previous afternoon to check on her. Should have been back before dark. He was not back before dark. Eli went looking at first light. Part 3. Walking. What I am writing now comes from Mrs. Pickett herself. She told it to Eli, and Eli told it to me, and I have tried to write it down as close to her words as I can manage. She said the storm had turned faster than either of them expected. She had gone out in the weather in search of a mare who'd wandered off with her foal. Reed had joined her, the way neighbors do, and had stopped to rest when the temperature dropped and the sleet began. Within the hour it was snow. Within 2 hours it was white in every direction, and the familiar shapes of the valley had disappeared entirely. She said she did not know where they were. Reed probably didn't either. He never said so. What he said was, "We keep moving." She was cold. She said it in the way a woman says a thing she does not want to make too much of. Matter of fact, just stating it. She was cold and her coat was thin, and she was not sure her hands were working right anymore. He took off his coat. She told him not to. She said those words exactly. "Don't you dare, Calhoun Reed, you foolish man." He put it around her shoulders without a word and kept walking. She said he walked the way she imagined he must have walked a long time ago, when he was young and had come from somewhere hard and was looking for somewhere to be. Not fast, not frantic, just steady. One foot and then the other. His eyes moving over the white landscape the way a man reads something he has read before and is trying to find his place again. She said he was talking, quietly, almost to himself, not to her. She could not make out all of it, but she heard him say, at one point, "I know this valley." And she believed him. She said it was perhaps an hour of walking, perhaps more. She had lost track of time the way you do in cold. But at some point, he stopped and looked at a tree line she could not distinguish from any other tree line and said, "There." And he was right. The picket farmhouse was 50 yards ahead of them in the snow. He had found it. Part 4. Inside. He got the door open. She got the fire going. Calhoun was shaking too hard to manage the matches himself. She moved around the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who has done cold weather work her whole life, found blankets, and got him settled by the fire. She said it was the chair by the hearth. She said he sat the way he always sat. Not collapsed, not dramatic, just settled. Hands in his lap, his back straight. She made tea and set a cup on the table next to him. She asked if he was all right. He said, "I'm all right. You're inside. That's what matters." She went to find more blankets. When she came back, he had closed his eyes. She sat with him through the night. She kept the fire going. She talked to him sometimes, she said, not because she expected an answer, but because the silence was too large otherwise. By morning, she knew. She had known for hours, she said. But she sat with him until Eli came, because it did not seem right to leave him alone, not after he had walked through a blizzard to make sure she wasn't. Part 5. What Gideon Wrote After. April 22nd, 1901. Storm over. Snow mostly gone now. George Pickett Jr. came back yesterday. Found his mother well. The mare wandered back, full with her. George Jr. came to our house afterward and stood in the yard for a long time without saying anything. Then he shook Eli's hand and went home. Reed's cabin is sound. Nobody has decided what to do with it. Nobody is ready. I am not given to this kind of writing, but it seems like it needed saying. He came over a ridge in September 1867 with nothing but a broken boot and the will to keep walking. He stayed. He learned this valley until it was part of the way he thought. And when a neighbor needed him, he walked through a blizzard with no coat and found his way home through it. He was a good man. The valley kept him well, and at the end, he kept it. April 28th, 1901. First proper warm day since the storm. Valley coming back to itself. I do not have anything else to say about it. Clara's note. I have been trying to write this for 3 weeks and have not managed it until now. He was there the whole time I was growing up, quietly, the way the river is there, the way the rock is there. Mrs. Pickett told me what he said at the end. I'm all right. You're inside. That's what matters. That was Calhoun. All of him. In one sentence. I keep thinking about what it took to walk through that storm. To not know where you are and to keep going anyway. To give what warmth you have left to someone else and trust that you'll find your way. He had always been that kind of man. I just didn't have the words for it until now. I went to the rock this morning. I listened to the calls of birds. Goodbye, Calhoun. The valley kept you well, and you kept it. Epilogue. A note from Sedalia. Gideon Marshall's journal contains 11 more entries after April 1901. They return, almost entirely, to planting dates and fence repairs and the price of corn. The last entry of that year, written in November, reads as follows. First frost last night. A jar is on the rock. Clara put it there. Eli was with her. 4 sentences. But Gideon Marshall was not a man who needed more than 4 sentences. Mrs. Pickett never spoke much about that April night. Every October, before the first frost, she walked to the flat rock and stood there a while before going home. She just stood. That was enough. Rest now. The letter is sealed. I'm Sedalia Voss, and I'll find you again next week. Good night. Most letters are written to people. This one is different. This one was written to a place. And if you have been here since the beginning, if you know the name of the flat rock, and the man who sat on it every morning, and the child who gave him a crawfish in a jar, then I think you will understand why. Some places deserve to be thanked. Good evening. I'm Sedalia Voss. I have one more letter for you tonight, the last one of this season. It arrived differently than the others. No cedar box, no shoe box, no journal tucked inside a wall. This one came in an ordinary envelope, postmarked Nashville, Tennessee, 1962. The return address was a street with a modest row of houses. The name on it was careful and unhurried, the penmanship of someone who had learned it properly and never forgotten. Inside was a single folded page. At the top, in the same careful hand, to the valley, from someone who owes it everything. The letter is not signed with a full name, just initials. L.M.C. Lottie Marshall Calloway, Evie's sister, Thomas's mother, 75 years old in 1962, writing from Nashville to a valley she had left decades before and never entirely stopped carrying. I do not know what prompted her to write it when she did. Perhaps she felt time moving. Perhaps she had been reading her mother's letters. Perhaps something smaller, a particular slant of autumn light, a jar glimpsed in a store window, had opened a door she had been keeping closed for years. What I know is that she wrote it, and that she wrote it honestly. Pull the covers up. The fire is lit. What we owe the valley. Part 1. What I remember. To the valley. I don't know how to begin a letter to a place. I have written a great many letters in my life, to my sister Evie every week for 30 years, to my son Thomas when he was surveying the mountains, to my grandchildren who are scattered now in ways I did not anticipate. I know how to begin a letter to a person, but you are not a person. You are something harder to address, and something I owe more to, and so I am going to do my best. I left you when I was 17 years old. I went to Nashville because there was a young man there I decided to love, and I did love him, and I do not regret it. But the leaving was also fear. I had confused the smallness of a valley with a small life, and I have known for most of the 60 years since that I was wrong. What I remember the river in the early morning, before anyone else was up. The particular sound it made in winter, harder and yet more deliberate, as if it had somewhere to be. My mother used to say it always knew what it was doing. I think she was right. I remember the flat rock, Clara's Rock, she called it, named for herself without embarrassment, the way she did most things. I used to sit there as a girl and watch the water move and think about everything I was going to do and everywhere I was going to go. I thought of it as a beginning. I did not understand yet that it was also enough. I remember Calhoun Reed. I was too young when he died to understand what I was losing. I understood later. I understood it the way you understand most things that matter. Slowly, over years, in the accumulation of smaller understandings that eventually add up to the large one. He was the valley made into a person, still, patient, generous. That is the only way I know how to say it. I have tried most of my life to be more like that. I have not always succeeded, but I have tried. Part 2. What I missed. I missed your autumns most. Nashville has seasons, but they are not your seasons. They do not have the same quality of burning, that slow, top-down fire along the ridgelines that my sister Evie once described as something you could warm your hands over. I have read that line so many times in her letters that I can see it without closing my eyes. I miss the store, my grandmother's store, and then my parents' store. The smell of it, the particular sound the floorboards made in the third aisle, the way my mother moved behind the counter with the efficiency of someone who had done it for so long it had become a kind of music. I missed the way the valley paid attention. That is a strange thing to say about a place, but it did. It noticed when someone was struggling and sent a neighbor. When someone arrived with nothing, it made room. When something needed remembering, it found a way to keep it. I did not have words for that when I was 17. I had places to go. Now I have all the words, and I want to use them while I still can. Part 3. What you gave. I want to tell you what you gave me, not what you gave the people who stayed, though I know what you gave them, and it was considerable, but what you gave me, who left. You gave me a mother who knew the difference between accurate and good, and said so without apology. You gave me a father who named a dog with one quiet word and never needed to explain himself. You gave me a sister who came home when she was ready and stayed and taught children arithmetic in the same schoolhouse where her own mother had been a student. You gave me a son who came back to you, Thomas. I remember the letter he sent me from the mountains when he had been on a survey crew for years, and something had finally shifted in him. He asked me if the valley would have him back. He wrote it carefully, like he wasn't sure of the answer. I did not know what Evie would say, but I knew what you would say. You always kept what came to you honestly. You kept Calhoun Reed, my sister, and my son. And somehow, even from Nashville, even across 60 years, you kept something in me, too. A belief, held quietly, that rivers are patient and that this is not a small thing. Part 4. What I want to say. I am not coming back. I know that now. Nashville is where my life has been, and I do not have another move in me. But I wanted you to know that I know what you were. I wanted you to know that the jar on the rock has meant something to me every October for 60 years, even from far away. That I think about it when the first cold comes. That I am glad that someone always places it. That I hope someone always will. I wanted you to know that I told my grandchildren about you. About the flat rock and the river and the man who sat on it every morning and the child who gave him something in a jar. They are young and they live scattered, and I do not know if any of them will ever find their way to you. But I told them. Because stories needed to be carried even by people who were never inside them. I wanted to thank you for my mother, for my sister, for my son, for the way the light comes off the water in October, for keeping what came to you, for being the kind of place a person can owe everything to and still leave and still carry, and at 75 years old, sit down to write a letter to. With gratitude and love, L.M.C. Epilogue. A note from Sedalia. I folded Lottie Marshall Calloway's letter carefully, and I put it back in its envelope. Then I sat with it for a while. I have held a great many letters in my time, found journals, water-stained and slim, shoe boxes and cedar boxes and plain envelopes postmarked from cities and mountains and train stations. I have read the words of men who walked into valleys and stayed, and women who left and came back, and boys who needed a sign to tell them where they belonged, and old soldiers who learned, late and imperfectly, that stillness was not defeat. Every one of those letters came from the same place, not Harlan's Hollow exactly, from the part of a person that knows some things deserve to be kept, that kindness given freely travels further than the hand that offered it, that rivers are patient, that the valley keeps. This is the end of the first season, but it is not the end of the stories. There are more. There are always more. I will bring them to you. Rest now. The season is sealed. I'm Sedalia Voss, and I will find you again. Good night.